Yeah, really difficult experience. I wish I had these guys with me to hold space and navigate what happened. Also known as bad trips, I think that the psychedelic industry isn't like waking up to it, but I think years and years of stigma, the drug war, reef of madness, perhaps led to a little bit of resistance into playing into some of these mainstream, often bad faith narratives. But look, bad trips happen, and the best thing we can do is mitigate them and develop some best practices, which I know some of the guys up here are doing and leading in the space. So yeah, let's get right into it. I'm Mayfer Busby, by the way, and these guys are going to introduce themselves. And yeah, perhaps you can kick off, Phoenix, and yeah, how do you navigate a challenging experience for your clients when they maybe hit a wall or feel like they've got something to release, or yeah?
For sure. So one of the first things I think is really important is to establish safety in the beginning. Because for me, in ceremonies, if people don't feel safe with you, you're not going to be able to calm them down. Just period, just from the very beginning. And so I establish, a safe space for them with me. Like, we get that good eye contact going. I also go through breathing techniques with them to tell them, hey, I might come up to you during the ceremony and I might go, that means copy me, The third thing that I think is really important is to be so calm and so present as a facilitator, because it will basically like attach to them the energy that you have. So if I'm in a ceremony with her, I'm sorry, I'm a demonstrative person. It's easier for me to show you. So if you're panicking, right? I am so calm, I'm unshakable, you can't move me, I'm like, okay. And then I get eye contact with people and I stare at them. And I ask permission, like, can I touch you? And if you say yes, and I'll be like, I breathe with you. And so I show them what to do more so than trying to tell them what to do or calm down, or like, I don't talk a whole lot, I demonstrate with my own essence, and that's how I transfer the majority of the time.
Yeah, we know set and setting obviously plays such a massive part, as well as dosage. But yeah, Joel, I remember being at your place, and there's a kind of, you can say it better, there's like a bong you use to make sure people don't have to like toke on it. And that actually really helped, because part of the most challenging thing with taking the DMT is actually getting it all down. But yeah, why don't you just take us through from that moment and yeah, through this kind of 15-minute incredible experience?
Yeah. So when at our center in Mexico, where we work with 5-MeO-DMT, being a very, very powerful experience, there's a lot of apprehension going in. So just like Phoenix said, taking steps beforehand to set a safe space, allowing everyone to be comfortable and feel held so they can feel okay with surrendering and letting go when that time comes. As Matha said, we use a special device you made specifically for 5-MeO-DMT, and it's quite effective, but it gets the whole pipe in there in one quick second. And, at that point, you've got a few seconds before total dissolution. And before that, it's been our job to provide a safe and nurturing container to where when your mind starts to dissolve away and starts to go offline, and the last thing it thinks is, am I in a safe place to completely let go? Am I in a safe place to completely surrender? And it's been our job to make sure that that answer is yes. And so with 5-MeO, people respond to it different ways, but sometimes there is that sheer terror that can emerge during the process of the ego dissolving away. There can be that absolute fright, that torment. And it's not our job to try and comfort you or to try and say it's going to be okay. When you're in the grips of a death process, hearing it's going to be okay does not help. What we want to do is provide a safe container that is able to hold anything that comes up. So allowing that fear, giving them space and safety to lean into that fear, giving them room to feel that terror that can leave such an impression on the psyche that it triggers new behavior, that it triggers that death process of our old patterning. It shows us to such depth the deepest layers of our psyche, and so that terror there is something to be worked with and something to be nurtured. Of course, if people are asking for help and need we've got a hand to hold, we've got soft things, we've got nice smelling mists, and we've got everything for you to feel that you are held and that you are okay. But in there, it's really for us around creating that safe, soft, comfy place for you to stretch out and completely lose it.
Well, I think that I just want to piggyback on that because I do think that the tryptamines kind of have their own set of parameters as opposed to other entheogens. Sometimes with 5-MeO or even just regular DMT, all the planning in the world, sometimes it doesn't mean anything. It's like, push the button and Kansas is going bye-bye, and it has a very different set of parameters. Like as facilitators, I think it's like there's only so much preparation you could do for 5-MeO. It's like. For me, it's kind of working with that one. It's more about the screening and the actual facilitation, making sure someone is absolutely, positively ready for that. Whereas with psilocybin or something, it might differ a little bit if somebody's sort of on the fence, a little apprehensive, because we have dosage protocols to work with. We have so many other techniques to sort of ease them into it. Didn't mean to hijack, but I thought it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming in. I'm basically moderating this panel today because recently I've been speaking about a ceremony that I went to last year in Mexico. It went totally awry. I freaked out. They lost control. They ended up asking me to lead the ceremony. The people facilitating had all done like 2 grams of mushrooms, which is way too high for a space-holding dose, and it just totally exploded. So. Yeah, I wonder, perhaps Ali, you can come in and, how do we choose the right facilitator or ceremony?
Yeah, I'm coming from more of the clinical setting. I have a ketamine clinic in Austin, and we skew pretty severe mental health. So our patient population is probably different than the rest of the people on the panel. And I think one of the things that Zach alluded to was, especially in our space, is the screening process is so important. Like, is somebody emotionally and mentally stable enough to start exploring and letting go? And then making sure that they have the right tools and support to do that prior to coming in. So that prep work in our clinical space is really important, especially if you're working with people with, we work with borderline personality disorders. They're coming in with a certain lens that's gonna lend them to likely having more negative experiences because that's the lens in which they see everything in their life. And so how do you make sure that they're working with a therapist that's going to be able to guide them gently through this process? And also, like Zach said, is our big thing is we start people really low and really slow, and we're slowly walking people up, and we're always returning to consent. We're always trying to remind people that they have an inner healer and an inner knower, and our guide is just to create a safe space with the tools and the healing and the tools and the support so that you can heal yourself. And that's what all of us are trying to do. We're not doing anything. The actual medicine is just a tool. You are really the catalyst for this. But in order for people to feel safe to do that, which is what we've all alluded to, you have to make sure that people's nervous system is able to relax. It's the only way that healing actually occurs, and if people can feel really safe to live the full expression of whatever's gonna come up and be able to process and find resilience within that. I think there's so much learning and knowing in bad experiences. I mean, bad can mean so many things to different people. What is somebody's definition of bad? We have to really kind of dig in to that first off, and also set expectations. I think so many people, especially at our clinic, a lot of people, this is what they believe. This is my last thing. This is it. It has to work. I've been struggling for 25 years. I've tried to commit suicide 3 times. I've been hospitalized. If this doesn't work, what's gonna happen? And coming in with that level of expectation really sets people up for potentially failure and some really hard emotions to go through. So making sure you have so everything from making sure you have a safety plan to really talking about, okay, what if this doesn't go the way you think or plan or read it should go?
Absolutely. And I suppose it would be remiss not to discuss probably what's been the biggest story of the psychedelic renaissance so far, the off-duty pilot that that pulled the switches in the cabin when he was riding up there 2 days after a big mushroom trip. We know, the importance of integration, and that derealization can happen, days or weeks after, and that's pretty much what happened in this case, perhaps.
It is sort of what happened, but the other part of the story too is also outside of psychedelics, has a lot to do with the FAA and the stigmatization around mental health. Pilots cannot outwardly express that, hey, I'm having a mental breakdown and I need to get help, otherwise they lose their pilot's license. And there is that stigma. It's not just within pilots, it's within many industries that we see around in the industrialized world, right? It's not okay to say we're not okay. And certainly I think that was the underlying problem there, because he did let friends and colleagues know that he wasn't okay. What happened after the mushroom experience, we can never be sure, but yeah, it was unfortunate. Yeah.
And like a trip or an experience can be as perfect as possible, but all of us then have to go back to imperfect worlds, societies, households. So how can we figure that out?
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we all have to get prepared for the idea that, the psychedelic experience, I think 9 times out of 10, if you have a challenging experience, it's not because you did not enjoy the compound and the effects of the compound. It's because you wrestled with something that came up from our imperfect world that you alluded to, and that's the struggle.
Yeah, I think the destabilization that can occur afterwards deserves as much a care and attention to be given as setting a safe space for the actual event itself, particularly with 5-MeO-DMT. This is an experience that is beyond the mind. It's completely ineffable. And so even if we had a beautiful, blissful experience, the mind can still struggle to come to terms with that type of whatever it is. And so that's why we really feel it's absolutely a non-negotiable to provide integration, support, and aftercare as part of it, not as an additional add-on, not as, oh, this is here if you need it. This isn't damage control. This is benefit optimization. And so our whole ethos, the way we work, is, just as you said previously, teaming up the right person with the right therapist that can hold whatever is going to come up. We believe in a very individualized approach. And if someone knows that they have someone that they're going to be able to work with for the next at least 4 weeks who can help them deal with the mess of the content that's going to be arising, because if we have any of these, a lot of these psychedelics, they lower the thinking mind. If the thinking mind is lowered, those protector parts that have been charged with protecting us from extreme emotions or traumatic memories, etc., they also go offline, allowing all of that to come up to surface. And so if we're cracking people open, it really is our duty to help be there to support and hold whatever comes up and comes out.
And I mean, I know about Ibogaine clinics that insist that folks that come even have to move house afterwards or move to a different community, because it's just, very likely that they'll slip into the same old habits of drug dependency and alcohol misuse if they go back to a certain place. So, how do you kind of get that right, Phoenix, making sure that people are most likely to be able to integrate what they've learned and get to their goals?
I think the first thing that's really important is to know that psychedelics is not for everybody. I don't think that everybody should take psychedelics, honestly. And it's not going to fix all of your problems. Like someone said the other day, that psychedelics is like a professor. It's you go to class and then you have to go and do the homework after. And so if people aren't prepared to do that work, then you shouldn't be doing psychedelics. Because you're gonna come face to face with yourself, and sometimes it's gonna be hard, and sometimes it might be blissful, but sometimes some stuff is gonna punch you in the face, and you're gonna get knocked down, and you're gonna be like, oh, wow, I didn't know I still had that. But like he said, it's super important to have an integration process, and your screening process. So like for me, you have to go through extensive screening with me before you can do a ceremony. I need to do an intake form. I need to know why you're here, why you're doing this, what you're looking to get out of this, to make sure that it's actually really realistic, and what protocols we're gonna set in place to help you to get to that place. Because after the ceremony, when all this stuff pops up, how are we gonna compartmentalize all of it? How are we gonna break it into pieces? What are the 5 most important things that you spend the most time with? That's what I break down. It's like, write down your 5 things before the ceremony even starts, and we break them apart. How does this make you feel? Good, bad, alive, free, like a slave, frustrated, everything that has to do with that one thing. And then we go through each section after the ceremony, and we're like, okay, how can we make you feel less frustrated? Do you need to get rid of this thing, or do you need to renegotiate it? Do you need to set some boundaries in place? And a lot of times people are struggling because they don't have a lot of boundaries set in place. And so that's what I find is really important.
Absolutely. And I know some people that go to ayahuasca ceremonies every fortnight. And yeah, surely that gets to a point where, yeah, people just need to stop taking the medicine and, yeah, get grounded. And yeah, but obviously there's maybe a financial incentive for the shaman facilitator to keep having them there. So yeah, how do you decide, Ali, to, when someone's had enough ketamine?
Well, I think in general it's a real individual approach. I do think, of course, there's standards and protocols and process and that kind of thing, but really it is so down to the individual. And we just have such a wide range of clients. If you've been struggling for 25 years, you're on 7 medications, your goal is days out of bed, like your process is going to look a lot different than a high-functioning CEO person who's coming in because they have some stress disorder and are not engaged with their children. Like, those two people are real different. But I also think, like, we do, you're taking surveys, mental health surveys before every single session. We're tracking progress. We have real data behind what's happening. We're also following up with people on a real regular, consistent basis. They have to be plugged into integration. We have group integration. We're making sure they're checking in, and we have, you have to be there for a minimum of 6 months. It's this whole, we have this whole process to make sure people don't fall through the cracks. Again, these are also adults who, there's only so much you can handhold and put rules and that, and if somebody doesn't want to comply with our structure and the way that we practice, I'm happy to refer you to somebody else, because guess what? There's plenty of ketamine clinics that'll give you as much ketamine as you want, and they don't care if you do any work, and it doesn't matter. And so there are people out there that if that is the tool that you've decided to use and you just want to use it to kind of placate your existence, that's completely fine, and we know people in the industry doing that. And there's a difference between that and doing fundamental core healing, which is the goal of what we do, is to not have people on long-term ketamine. It is to use these tools as needed.
Yeah, that would be a disappointment to many people on the dance floors of England. But yeah, as I mentioned in the intro, Zach, I think, yeah, bad trips and integration are really a central part of the conversation now, especially compared to the 60s. What does that say about the moment we're at right now on the kind of cusp of, yeah, mainstreaming this whole thing?
That says a lot. And you also, throughout the course of this conversation, you made several great points, which I think everyone should be really cognizant of. Financial incentive around retreat centers, ketamine centers, even individual facilitators, how to pick the right retreat center that you're going to, what kind of aftercare do they provide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are so many things here that kind of fit into this puzzle that the modern psychedelic renaissance is kind of it's kind of exposed. It started off as a very well-intentioned sort of quality problem, but now, we've created kind of some things to look out for. But to go back to this question, yeah, I mean, I get asked that question a lot, and if you go back and look at the limited, in the 1960s, most fledgling psychonauts were pretty much flying blind. There was the psychedelic experience, the doors of perception, that was kind of it. There really wasn't much instruction, there wasn't really a blueprint to follow so much, and millions of people sort of just got left in the lurch with sort of a chasing the peak experience, okay, now what sort of phenomenon. And we saw what happened. We saw, how people sort of just fell off the cliff because of that. And I think if there's any single thing that the modern movement has done right, it has provided countless different models for what integration looks like, and for the implication that psychedelics are just a part of a much bigger holistic healing process. In and of themselves, they are not the modality. They are a catalyst, an accelerant for the rest of your holistic modality that works for you as an individual. And separating that and knowing where it fits into your own interpersonal journey and puzzle for what it is you want to get out of your own dharma, I think is a much healthier approach.
All right, you've got the million-dollar question, Joel. Is there a good part to a bad trip? Is there a good part to a bad trip?
You know, what we used to call bad trips, but now call challenging experiences.
Rebrand.
You know?
Rebrand, right.
I think some of the most significant bouts of healing come after a challenging experience, when we are forced to face those aspects of ourself that we may not acknowledge or may not even know about. And of course, it's going to feel absolutely mortifying as it's occurring. But that type of shock, that type of sheer terror is... has an archetypal place in the human psyche, you know, that seems to inspire growth. And so the challenging experience, I don't think it's about avoiding it. I don't think it's about making it not happen. It's about creating a container that is meant to hold whatever comes up, because psychedelic work, just as Zach said, this is an entire holistic aspect that it's just a part of, and it allows us access to those parts that we normally cannot view or access. And so honoring the challenging experience and moving with it.
But I'm glad you didn't sugarcoat it. I mean, sheer terror is an option. Yeah. You know, it is one of the many options. And if you're honest with people about that going into it, I think it makes it much more palpable, should it occur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a friend was saying that he took mushrooms with his girlfriend on New Year's Eve last year, and she totally freaked out. They had to call an ambulance. And then, when they got to the hospital, there was like a queue of ambulances, so she had to wait like 2 hours to get into the hospital. Yeah, what's the good part of that, Phoenix? Sounds pretty destabilizing.
Yeah,
Well, I've never had anybody have to go to the hospital. You said, what's the good part of somebody freaking out and having to go to the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, it was her first trip.
So I think it's really important to understand that psychedelics, it opens you up to your most vulnerable state. You know, for me, I do psilocybin, so I know yours is probably a little bit shorter of a trip, but like it lasts for a long ass time. You know, so I can't allow for people to be in my ceremonies in terror for that long, because then they disturb everybody else. You know, and then it transfers, so everybody is in terror. So I try to make sure that I create a safe setting, because even if you're doing it by yourself, you have to understand that the energy of everything around you is going to attach. It's going to influence your experience. The people that are around you, the music, I don't care if it's your neighbors, the smell that you'll be smelling, like it makes all of your senses like magnified. So you have to really be intentional about how you set your space. And so that is something that's really, really big for me, and knowing who's gonna be there to hold space for you, even if it's not talking and, like you said, allowing you to go through those hard things, but somebody that's just gonna sit in the corner and just make sure you're good, like just watch you. Like if you're gonna be going into psychedelics by yourself, you need to do it the right way. You need to be safe about it so you don't end up at the hospital because you didn't know what you were doing. You're playing around.
Or maybe we should give EMTs like some sort of basic harm reduction for psychedelics, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there was a video going on Instagram last night. A guy saw someone, who was dependent on crack in the street and took a DMT pen over to him on Friday night, which brings up, a lot of really serious...
How'd it go?
Really serious questions. Apparently the guy didn't feel much, allegedly. But we've got 3.5 minutes left, so maybe a quick 1 minute round. What should we do? Yeah. Say anything you want. Let's.
I don't think we have enough time
for Q&A.
that. Okay.
Anybody got?
Who's got the $1 million question here?
Hi. So my question is how you as facilitators address when a psychedelic state becomes really confusing, you know? Sometimes, especially as we're starting out, it could be the medicine showing us something. Maybe a repressed memory comes up and it's just hard to accept, but it could also be a projection of something that we're going through. And so my question is, you know, like I like to look at facilitators as somebody who can help me discern kind of what the content of what I experienced was and where it was coming from. But what is the healthy boundary between helping somebody through that without like me giving my power away, you know?
That's it.
Yeah, I think that really starts with the development of trust at the beginning and making sure that you understand and that there's a rapport between whoever the therapist, integration coach, facilitator, whoever that is, and the person. I think there's a lot in the prep work that happens that can help people discern like how they're going to interpret information, that kind of thing. And then I think if you're a really good facilitator and you've been trained in a way that's really your job. Your job is to hold your boundary at you and to know what is yours and what is not yours and what is your client's and allow them to live their full experience without you projecting your ideas or thoughts or feelings onto what. It really is about, can you ask better questions? You're trying to get them to internally explore what's happening for them and not you interpret what happened with them through your own lens and then project it back on them.
So for me, mine's is a little bit different because I don't allow people to really talk during ceremonies. And so if they're asking me a question, it's more of like presence for me. But if they ask me a question that's like really hard, I either take them back to breath so they can breathe through it, or either I will say, we'll find out. We'll find out.
That's
you know,
great.
and I'll
That's
sit
great.
with them because it's their work. Like, it's not for me to give you the answer. I can break it down for you the next day. But in this moment, it's for you to break it down for yourself. It's for you to get that information that's being downloaded into you. So I will sit there and I'll be present so that you're not giving your power away. You're still doing the work. And I'm acknowledging and I'm seeing you and I'm like, I'm here. We'll find out. We'll find out together. And that's kind of like my go-to in ceremonies so that I'm not telling you what it is. It's not my job to be the therapist in that moment. So that's how I do it.
For me, keeping it very simple, using as little words as humanly possible to give their mind less to attach onto and use as an anchor. Offer a very safe, secure presence. Be very aware of my body language and our team's body language. And then everything else was covered in prep.
And I'll just say, yeah, like to echo what they said, and it's a great question you asked, but during the actual ceremony itself, it shouldn't rest on the cognitive inclination to try to figure it all out while it's happening. We're not there to figure it all out. We're there to go within. We could figure it out later in integration and kind of unpack it, but during this ceremony itself, go within. Go within. Yeah, I think we're kind of running out of time. But that's a pretty big question.
Curiosity. Approach it with curiosity rather than meaning making and giving them answers. Sometimes a little bit of nudging can help, but if they're met with curiosity and are given the tools to explore what just occurred, they can usually come up with far more significant realizations than we can provide for them.
Yeah, and everything has some kind of meaning to it. The most esoteric, metaphorical download has some kind of real world meaning to your own life to it.
Eventually, you'll find out.
Yeah, go find out.
All right, well, you know who to contact if you're in the throes of despair and the Fireside Project aren't picking up the phone. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.